So you live in Valencia.
I do indeed.
I've done the marathon there.
Okay, it's good. Apparently, it's good.
Valencia's really flat.
That's what they say. Now, I'm not a runner, but apparently that's what they say. So I'm going to take their word for it.
It's a beautiful place to run around. And I remember you've got like in Valencia, is there like is it a museum or an arts place that's got like a little body of water that runs around it?
Yes. So we've got like the City of Arts, it's called, and you've got the Palo de Musica, and it's just a nice little.
It's quite modern.
Oh yeah, the City of Arts. That's it. The City of Arts. It is astonishing.
So when you finish the Valencia marathon, they have you running. They build like it's like a platform along the water.
Yeah.
So you feel like Jesus.
It's good. What an ending to a marathon if you want to do that.
I was pretty much crawling across the finish line. It's funny when I know so many people that are like, I'm going to do the London Marathon this year, and I'm like, I need to tell you how horrific an experience it is. Like, it's really, really brutal.
How many have you done there?
Just one.
Just one.
Okay. One is plenty.
In Valencia, or one in London and in Valencia? Just one.
Just Valencia.
Well, you picked a good place.
It's a great place.
You're gonna do it. Come on.
But it's like the last, because you're so motivated. So this isn't. If anyone's just tuned in, this is not a podcast on marathon running. You do all the training and you put so much into it, and there's so much excitement, and it's just the most boring thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, it just goes on and on. And what they don't show you, have you ever seen on TV? You know the London Marathon on TV they show?
I get bored watching it.
Right. But it's all like happy people dressed as crayons and Where's Wally running around, smiling. Nothing like that. Yeah. No, it looked like the Battle of the Somme by the end. People were being loaded into ambulances, and like, it was horrendous.
And in Valencia, they take their running pretty seriously, because it's such a running community too. So there'll be no dressing up there, especially.
No, they take that really, really seriously. Have you done many podcasts talking about your kind of journey?
I've done a good few now, yes. Not many in person, a lot online. Probably living in Valencia probably leads to that. But it's nice to be in person. It's just better connecting in person.
It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
It does.
I've done a few online, and you miss that connection and that space, and I feel like you don't really build up much of a rapport with the person,
especially when you're speaking about such sensitive topics. You're needing a connection. You're needing that face-to-face connection, that contact, eye contact, the body language. It makes all the difference. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, mate, you're more than welcome. First of all, the most kind of important question that I think often gets missed, and I like to ask, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. And I'm cold, but I'm good.
apart from the British climate.
No, I'm good. I was playing paddle recently, and I've hurt my knee. Now, I tore my ACL a couple of years ago, and that recovery was difficult. I'm not saying I've tore my ACL now, but hopefully I'm not. But that was a difficult recovery, because I was like 6 months not doing exercise. We know how good exercise is for your mental health. Not being able to move, not being able to do the things that I love to do. So it was very sedentary during my recovery, and I just felt so useless. So I'm hoping this new injury isn't anything too bad, but we'll see. So I'm good apart from that.
Good. And we're all very, very glad to hear it, first and foremost. So you're very open about the things that you've been through. You're very open about your journey. You've kind of had to be to get where you are today. So public speaking, mental health advocate.
That is it.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Someone brought that to the table. Actually, a guest that I had on the show called me a mental health advocate, and I was like, I'm a what? He went, yeah, you're a mental health advocate, and I was like, oh, I guess I am.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah,
it's nice, isn't it?
It's really, really important. Have you heard the show? Have you listened to it?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So the kind of, just to sort of fill you in a little bit, the reason that I wanted to do this show originally was that I don't feel like men are encouraged to have vulnerable conversations with each other, and I feel like that side of it is where problems arise, and you know, there's been such a rise of male suicide, and men really, really struggling. We need to encourage vulnerable, honest conversations. And for anyone listening, you were in the police force, weren't you?
Yes, I was. So a complete opposite culture for vulnerability to thrive in. It was definitely a challenging one to be a man in, especially a modern man, and the pressures that we have in society to what we expect to be men, and not to be vulnerable, not to share our feelings, not to open up about how we feel, whether it's military, police, or anything like that. Being in a culture like that for a man, it's very challenging, very, very difficult. And I've seen the impacts of a poor workplace culture where vulnerability just didn't exist or wasn't allowed to exist. And I know people may have good experiences in the police, and I can only speak from my experience. I can't throw a blanket on it, but there's so many in the police force that will not open up about how they feel or what they saw and how it impacted them, because they believe that they're expected to go to the next thing, because they're there to protect people. And as a police officer, I always saw it as I'm protecting people, I'm protecting the public in whatever it may be, but I forgot to protect number one. I forgot to protect myself. And I would say many police officers are on the same. We feel that sense of duty, which is great, but
at what cost?
At what cost? You cannot pour from an empty cup. So they say. So for people to give yourself to serving, like in the police force, that's absolutely amazing. But you have to understand, you have to put yourself first to be able to help other people. I don't think many people do that, and I certainly didn't.
How long were you in the police for?
I was in the police for 5 years. Seemed like an eternity, but 5 years. And I think for me, the most difficult thing about those 5 years was that it was from 22 to 27. Very young, very almost naive in life. You know, I hadn't really had the life experience.
You were a baby.
Exactly.
I work with youngsters.
Yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because when you're living it, when you're going through it, you think you're an adult.
Yeah.
You're treated like an adult. You've got a wage. You're paying national insurance. You can have children. You can have all of that. You can vote. All of these things. You're like, well, I'm a fully fledged adult. Yeah. What can hurt me? Turns out a lot.
A lot. Yeah, exactly. And we don't. Well, I don't think we emotionally mature, especially men, until a lot older, maybe in late 20s. And I think that, especially in jobs like the police and stuff, you should not be bringing somebody who's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 into that kind of environment. Yes, there may be exceptions, but you need to look at the life experience that they've got. I just went from university to the police.
Wow.
You know, so I didn't really understand
anything.
Anything really. You know, I really didn't. And yes, I grew up in Northern Ireland, which had its own challenges, coming out of the Troubles and seeing some of the things you saw. But because I was born in 1992, Good Friday Agreement was 1998. We were coming out of the Troubles, and my parents were very sheltered in my upbringing, which probably made me in the police not start from a good starting point, because I came from a sheltered upbringing because of what had happened in Northern Ireland. And then going from that to the police, where you were not being sheltered, I didn't know what drugs looked like. I didn't know what people were fully capable of. Yes, you'd hear the stories, but there's a difference between hearing the stories and actually seeing the worst in people day in, day out. And it really impacted me. Like, I can't say anything less than that. It really, really impacted me in so many ways, because seeing negativity day in, day out, especially the worst in people, it's an awful thing to see.
Is there anything in place within the police force now? Is there an outlet now? They must be more aware of mental health problems and men struggling. Are they doing anything?
At the end of the day, they have stuff. They had stuff when I was there, but there's a difference between having stuff and your staff actually using the stuff. So let's say we'd witnessed a traumatic event, whatever that trauma may have been. Yet again, they would dictate what that trauma was. So, like, you witness a car crash where someone died. They dictated that was a traumatic event, which is fair enough. And a couple of days later, you'd get an email to say, you've witnessed this traumatic event. Counseling's available. Are you wanting it? And then you'd turn to your colleague of 25 years, 26 years, the old school kind of cop, and you'd say, did you get that email? And they'd say, oh yeah, deleted it, a lot of rubbish. And you're like, oh, yeah, 22, 23 years old. You're like, oh, I'll just delete it too. That's the kind of culture. So you can have everything in place. You can have the best possible workplace well-being strategy to help when there's that toxicity that is in place with men, and especially how they perceive therapy and how they deal with their emotions.
Yeah.
What can they do? And I still speak to people in the police, and they say, oh yes, they've created a new app for us. And then a couple of years later, it's, oh, the app's now been gone. They didn't want to spend the money on it. So it's difficult for them because the culture really does exist. And it's just like, I think that's the uphill battle with men's mental health in general, where we've suffered because of generational trauma that's been passed down to us. And those generations still exist. So our generation and the newer generation, they can bring a new generation up where open communication exists, and it's going to be a lot better, I hope. But we still have so much of society where they will never speak about their mental health. They do not want therapy. They will self-medicate through drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be. And you saw that in the police often. Now, I didn't, but I saw it. So I would contact my colleague after a night shift. We finished at 7 a.m. and I'd text him saying, how's it going? And he'd send me a picture of a couple of beers. So he's having a couple of beers at 7 a.m. just to process his emotions from the night shift before going to bed. That's unhealthy, having beers at 7 a.m. after doing a 10-hour shift.
Yeah.
And that's how people process their emotions.
Do you think part of that, because you touched on it a minute ago, the sort of hyper masculine world of being a police officer and the expectations that are on your shoulders, as you said, you're there to protect. First and foremost, you are a caregiver, a protector. That is quite a masculine role to portray. So you've got that on the one hand, but then on the other side of it, you need an environment where you are allowed, not just allowed, allowing you is just sending you these emails, encouraging you to be vulnerable, encouraging you to speak out and to deal with these things. That's a really difficult thing to navigate, isn't it?
100%. It's very, very difficult for them. But as I said, leaders should act better so that they are showing the behaviors that they want to be seen. And when you saw the leaders who were maybe old school in their own right, they can say all they want. By the way, you should do this. This will be good for you. But you see their behavior and you think, wait a minute, but there's a difference between you encouraging it and you actually empowering me to do this. So it was difficult. You always thought that you were going to be judged. You thought you were going to be judged heavily if you had to do any kind of therapy, because many people in the police force would be off with work-related stress. And I remember some of my colleagues would say, "Oh yes, they're just faking it. Stress. What do you mean stress? They're just making up an excuse." And again, when it's mental health stress, if that's the culture, what people are thinking when people are off with stress in the most highly stressful job out there, what do you mean they're making it up? People are impacted by stress and they're allowed to be, even though they're signed up to the job. Because I hear so many people say, "What did you expect? When you join the police, what did you expect? If you join the military, that's going to happen." I'm like, yes, but you're still allowed to be impacted by these things.
You're a human being.
Exactly.
We're complicated creatures.
Very complicated.
We have nuances. Our brains are these huge supercomputers that process information and trauma on a very deep level. And you've got to have an outlet. What were you like when you first joined the police? What was your kind of mindset like when you joined?
When I joined the police, I was a completely different person to probably the person I ended up being. I was fun, optimistic, yes, naive, but just young 22-year-old. I enjoyed living life, and that was, just a very positive attitude. The police really did chew me up and spit me back out, because it turned me into a negative, bitter, pessimistic person. It really did, because see, when you see what people are capable of in the bad sense, day in, day out, your belief, your love for humanity and what people are actually capable of in a nice way, it completely goes. It completely goes. You just have this real toxic view of the world and of people. And in life, we are, people-centered. We have to connect with people because connections is what humans do. It's so important for us to live. And when you have a warped view about people and what they're capable of, and you distrust them, and when you think of all these negative things, all of a sudden
You
you're just
become a negative person.
100%, and that fun, optimistic person just completely went away. And it's sad thinking about it and how much I lost myself. But I also understand the reasoning why.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult because there's not many police officers out there that will probably be optimistic. And that is part and parcel of the job. And it's a coping mechanism too, because, they have to do the dark humor to survive, and they'll make a little joke, which is absolutely fine when they make little jokes. But when your little jokes and your dark humor becomes your only coping mechanism, that's the problem. Make the joke initially just to get by, and you think, okay, just needed that to lighten the mood or whatever. But then be willing to actually talk about your emotions, be willing to process them. But if you don't, that dark humor just becomes more dark humor and makes you really insensitive and bitter, resentful, and pessimistic. Just a negative individual. It's sad how much it can change somebody.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell it really affected you.
Yeah, 100%. Because I am a naturally positive person. And, when I left the police, all of a sudden I found myself again. And you'll probably see me. I'm bubbly. I like to smile. I like to laugh. I don't take myself too seriously. And in the police, that completely changed me. From 22 to 27, when you shouldn't have the cares of the world on your shoulders. I did, and I probably missed out a lot in my 20s of living a life of a 20-year-old. It's sad.
I often question this about myself when, in our quiet times, when we're looking back and we're thinking about things that we've done and choices that we've made. Do you live with regrets, do you think?
I'm not, because I am such a positive person, I don't like to say I live with regret, because I think everything that's happened in my life has made me to be sitting opposite you today, which I would not change for the world.
No.
But would I wish that I was sitting across from you today in different circumstances with some decisions I made differently? Of course I would, because we're human. We have to look at some of our life choices and think, oh, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
We learn from these things. And one of the positives that I take from it is that I find a passion for mental health. I find a passion for helping people in a different way to the police. And I find a job that I absolutely love because I get to help people day in and day out, whether it's organizations or people. So I can't live with regret, but I do often think, oh, my 20s could have been different.
Yeah,
Could have been different.
It's funny, isn't it? When you just to pick up on something that you mentioned a minute ago, you were talking about trauma. And experiencing and seeing things in the police, not to be too graphic, but was there a particular moment? Was there a particularly traumatic moment that you just went, I can't do this anymore. This is affecting my mental health?
It would probably be, there's many things along the way that impacted you. Different incidents where I remember there was a wife who was waiting for her husband to come home, and he'd retired, but he did one last job for his organization where it was a driving job, taking a car to somewhere else. And he obviously didn't make it home. There was a car crash, and I had to go give the message to her to say that's not
heavy. That is
awful. And I will remember her reactions. I will remember her face. I get tingles thinking about it right now, because no matter what, I remember that I will always have been that person who gave her the message that's changed her life
She
forever.
can still picture your face. Exactly. That's the reality of it.
Exactly. And it's sad. And there's so many of these faces that I've got in my head that my message changed their life, or in a bad way. And that's heavy. It is hard to deal with, especially at the time, never mind looking back. And that one was particularly hard because it just made me think a lot more about life really is just so finite where it can just go like that. And when you're in a job that I didn't like, I knew it impacted my mental health and things like that. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? But I didn't have the bravery to ask myself the questions of, Rob, what do you want to do? What different things do you want to do in your life? I felt very institutionalized. I think many people in the police will feel institutionalized, where they think, I've been given all these new skills in the police force. I've been trained up as a police officer. How could I use that in anything else? I couldn't just be like, I'm going to become a mechanic. I'm going to become an accountant, because you've committed so much into that job that you feel like you can't do anything. I've realized now that the skills that you learn can be passed on to so many different
Mm.
things in life. But at that time, I thought, well, that's me. That's my career, and I would do different things in the police. But that's my
You
job.
didn't think it was transferable.
I didn't think it was transferable, because especially the other police officers who've been there for years and years and years, they would tell you how often they hated the job, how much they wanted to quit, but they were like, yeah, but what else would I do? Or, the pension's good, so like 5 years time I get my pension. They were living for a future because the pension was good or whatever. And I just think life is for the now. And it took me a long time to realize that. And on my last ever shift, that's probably when I realized it the most, where I was like, this needs to change completely.
Wow. Because you've spoken really. I mean, I went down a bit of a Rob rabbit hole. You've spoken really openly about PTSD. You've spoken about suicidal thoughts. The work that you did in the police had a real visceral impact on you, didn't it? Was there a tipping point? Was there a moment where you went, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, there was. And it's sad thinking about it, because I was only 25 years old. I was an absolute baby.
So young.
Exactly.
To be having such big conversations with yourself.
100%. And so it's so young to have those conversations with yourself, and so young to be utterly alone with those conversations. I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't share it with my family, my friends, my colleagues. Nobody knew what I was going through, because I wanted that harder exterior where it's like, right, I just need to get on with it. And I grew up in a military family, where my family were either military or the police. So you can probably imagine that macho-ness that existed, where men do not show their emotions. And if I ever showed my emotions, my dad, I love him dearly, but he would be quick enough to say, grow up or man up. Those toxic things that we hear day in and day out. So I always knew that, right, okay, I couldn't show my emotions. And that just kept continuing and spiraling with the police, because I was in a culture where I can't show my emotions. I need to man up and just keep going, keep going. And I remember at 25, I hated my life. I hated my job. I hated my life in general, my personal life. I was, on my days off, I was sleeping, because I was physically exhausted doing shift work. Mentally and emotionally, I was drained, because I wasn't processing my emotions, on shift with the people that I should be processing my emotions with. I would be going home, and when my head hit the pillow, that's when I was thinking about these things and thinking, could I have done something different to help save that person's life? That is such a big thing to ask yourself, if you could have saved someone's life by doing something different. And you can literally drive yourself crazy thinking that. And I was thinking about that when my head hit the pillow, when it was just me, myself, and I in that head, rather than bouncing it off somebody saying, could I have done more? And you get that feedback and you get reassurance. You think, oh no, I've done everything. So I was judging myself, and I couldn't have done anything more in most of these occasions.
We're all just trying our best.
Exactly. But when my head hit the pillow, I did not think like that. And it was just a really unhappy place to be in here in my mind.
Did it ever affect your work?
It didn't. And I think this is the thing that probably impacted me more in my personal life, because I wore a mask at work every single day, where I was that person with the smile. I would joke around, make sure everybody else was okay, and laugh and joke with them.
You were still doing from the outside a good job.
Yes.
You
I was showing up.
Critical thinking. You were thinking fast. You were making good decisions.
Yeah.
You weren't coming under any scrutiny from your superiors. It was all, Rob's really good. This is fine.
100%. And I was really well thought of in the police, where people would say how good an officer I was. But in my personal life, it impacted me massively, where, as I said, I would just sleep. I was a functioning depressive. At 25 years old, my days off, I would sleep until like 3 p.m. and then get up. And sometimes I'm like, oh, do I want to shower? Okay, I'll just have a quick shower. These are the kind of things I was doing on my days off. And then I'd go to work and be like, okay, happy days. I'd show up for work day in, day out. So
it must have been exhausting for you.
It was. And I think that's why I hit rock bottom at age 25. Because I remember one day I got up and I thought, and it was at 3 p.m. again, and I just thought, I'm fed up with this being in this body, in this mind. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I lost 2 stone in weight. I couldn't sleep. No wonder I can't sleep because
Mm.
of what's going through my head. So when you're not sleeping and you've got the weight loss and you're not exercising, you're not thinking the right frame of mind. You're not
Mm.
thinking in a healthy way.
Mm.
And my critical thinking, as you've just said, was all put into my job rather than my personal life. So my personal life, I was just a shell of who Rob was. And one day I woke up and I just thought, this is it. I'm going to take my own life. This is the only way out. This is the only light at the end of the tunnel. And it's sad thinking that at 25, I thought that the only light at the end of the tunnel was to end it all. And I decided that would be it. I walked down my hallway to go downstairs in order to take my own life. And thankfully, I was met by my dog, Louis. And Louis looked up at me with the big brown eyes that he's got. And he gave me one big lick. And it was that lick in that moment that just made me think, wait a minute. I don't care about my family. I don't care about my friends. I don't care about my colleagues. I don't care about myself. But this dog needs somebody. And me and Louis did everything together. So I thought to myself, how could I leave him? That's the only way I could process what had happened. I thought, I can't leave anybody, but I don't care about leaving anybody, but I can't leave him. And that lick, I'm not afraid to say, saved my life because I continued living for that dog. Something so simple, but yet so transformational in my life where I said that one lick, I wouldn't be here. And I swear on this, I would not be here today if it wasn't for that lick and for Louis. So I'm thankful. Of course, I look back and I get really emotional talking about it because when I do my talks, my motivational speaking, I can tell my story, but you kind of you say it in a way where you probably don't engage in your emotions
Yeah,
too
you're
much.
just telling a
Just
story that
telling
you've told before.
exactly, but in a more intimate setting like this, where we're talking about it, always gets me that lump in the throat where I just think, jeez, I really was that close to taking my own life. And I think this is yet again what fuels my passion to help people because I've been there. I've hit rock bottom. I know what it feels like, and I know what it feels like to be this close. And I know that you don't think about other people. You're not being selfish in that way. You're just not thinking. You don't want to hurt people. You don't want you to upset your family or your friends. Of course you don't. But in here is so much of a burden. You think it's the only way. It's the only way out, and it's sad. It really is sad, but I'm thankful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're thankful. I'm glad. The reason that you stayed silent for so long, because from the picture that you've painted about those 5 years in the police force, um, it feels like a gradual progression. It wasn't just one thing happened and everything fell apart like a deck of cards. It was very much the constant being beaten down, the negativity, the toxic environment, the masculine side of it, the things that you were exposed to. Why it was, I know it wasn't encouraged within the police force, but did you not feel you could speak to a friend or family? I know you said your dad's not great, but was there a friend or anyone that you felt that you could open up to?
To be honest with you, because of my upbringing, I always felt like that would be the number one weakness
Wow.
to reach out to anybody. And every now and again, you'd speak to a friend and be like, "Oh, things are rubbish, aren't they?" But it'd be really on a superficial level. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
I think
yeah.
men have that superficial level of doing it, and then some men have that deeper vulnerability level. I was at that superficial way where it's like, "Oh yeah, life's crappy at the minute, right? Let's do something."
Mm.
So it was like that rather than I actually came this close to ending my life. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that until 2023, and that happened in 2018. Not my family, not my friends. Nobody knew that. I never told anybody until
How did they react?
it's interesting where I always feared telling my dad, especially, and I was like, I wonder what he would think about it. And I remember telling him, and his response was, I've been depressed too. I was close to taking my life. And I thought to myself, right in that moment, I was like, wait a minute, my dad, the most masculine energy kind of individual that you can probably imagine, if he can respond to vulnerability of what I'm doing with vulnerability, there's something in that where men can do it. We just need people out there to be willing to start these conversations, because open communication will save lives. And as I said, that example was just like that. It took me aback, and I was almost smiling. You know, my dad's telling me that he was depressed and almost taking his own life, and I was smiling, but I wasn't smiling because of what had happened to him, but I was smiling because I was like, wait a minute, there's a breakthrough. My dad's opening up to me and he's being vulnerable to me for the first time in my
Has it
life.
changed your relationship?
Yeah, definitely. I think my dad's definitely a lot more softer to me now, and softer in life. He's willing to have conversations to say that he's maybe not doing too great himself. There's probably ways he says it in his own way, but whatever way he wants
in
to
a
do
really
it.
gruff
Yeah.
Northern Irish accent.
Exactly. But you know, no matter what, I now know when he's maybe struggling a little bit. I'm like, okay, he needs something there. So he may not be as blunt to say, I'm really struggling with my mental health, but he will openly say something along those lines that I'm like, okay, you may be struggling mentally. So it has changed it for the better. And this is why, you know, I promote to people, I'm like, try open communication. I've been there not openly communicating with anybody because I feared being judged. I feared that people would look down on me. I feared that people would pity me. And men, I think in my experience, we don't like pity.
No.
We don't like people pitying us and be like, oh, are you okay now? And then check in on us every single day. You okay now? I used to hate that. So I would be like, I don't want to tell my family because I didn't want them every day to be like, are you okay now? And I'm just like, I don't need that pity. I need you, yes, to check in, of course, but there's different ways to do it. And I think especially men, we just don't like pity. So we then just think, we'll just get on with it.
Yeah. And there's a lovely sort of byproduct of opening up to somebody. When you open up to somebody, let's say another man, for example. When you open up to another man and you say, I'm struggling, things are shit, I could use a chat. Not only does it help you in getting it off your chest, but you also give them permission to open up as well. So there's this beautiful symbiotic connection that occurs where you both benefit from one person opening up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, I say this to organizations when I give my mental health talks. I say, as a leader, when we say, how are you to people, let's face it, we've got that British culture where people say, I'm good, thanks, you. And then you say, yeah, I'm good, thanks. Or I'm fine, thanks. What about you? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I always say, you're now banned as a leader to say, I'm fine or I'm good. Because firstly, are you ever just fine? Or are you ever just good? You asked me right at the start and I said, I'm good. And then I went on to a little bit of detail, like, you know, I've actually hurt my knee and things like that. And I always say to leaders, and I say leaders, anybody in any organizations in any walk of life, it's not the how are you that we need to change in society. It's our responses to the how are you. So if someone even asks us, how are you? You can be like, you know what? It's actually been a stressful week. I've had a lot on, or it's been really productive. You know, I've got this done, this done, this done. Whether it's negative or positive, open up a little bit. It doesn't need to become a counseling session in the canteen, or it doesn't have to be that. But by saying something more than I'm good and I'm fine, by saying just something like, you know what, it's been a stressful week. I'm looking forward to the weekend or whatever. When you say, what about you? I can guarantee you 99% of the time, they will not reply with I'm good or I'm fine. They will reply with something more because, as you've just said, you've give them permission to say something different than I'm good and I'm fine. Because when we respond, I'm good and I'm fine, for me, that's an alarm thinking, you're not really asking me because you care about how I actually am, you know, so I'll just reply saying, I'm good too. So if we get into that habit of just saying, you know what are we? Are we good? Are we not? So I always tell people, you're banned from saying, I'm just fine or I'm just good, and see how it opens up conversations. It's such a simple thing.
Yeah, it is
but
when you
it's
say it
effective,
like that.
Yeah.
But actually, the ramifications of giving some context
Exactly.
is hugely important.
Yeah, 100%. It's so impactful, and people have actually tried it, and they've got in contact with me and say, I can't believe how something so simple can actually have such a positive impact in a workplace culture. I'm just talking about in a workplace setting at the minute, but we do this in our personal lives too. People are going to open up a little bit more.
Do you do a lot with workplace culture? Do you do a lot of work with business owners and people
Yeah.
encouraging men to open up in the workplace?
Yeah, definitely. And with my motivational speaking, there's different things I look at, like resilience, adaptability, but mental health's one of the major ones that I talk about because in the workplaces, I've seen the impact of a poor workplace culture.
Mm.
I've seen the impacts of a toxic workplace culture, and that can impact you so much. And I always say, a job can't make you happy by itself. A job will never make you just happy by itself, but by itself, a job can make you very unhappy. So we have that sense of responsibility to create a culture where you're not making them happy by itself, yes, but you're not making them unhappy. It's we're creating a supportive culture, an open communication culture, a culture where people are not afraid just to say how they feel, to talk about their mistakes in an open communication way. And it's so transformational when we have that kind of culture. So in my talks, I look into A, why it's important, and B, how can we openly communicate a little bit more. And sometimes you just have to almost scare men into telling them this is why you need to do it. And I always say it's always bigger than you. You know, I say to men, you know, you may have children. I say, how do you want that next generation to talk? I say, do you want your sons or daughters to suffer in silence? And of course, nobody would want that. And I say, well, then it starts with you because you're now responsible at almost training the new generation because we're all part of a generation which are a couple of generations ago where people have been in the First World War, the Second World War. We are part of a generation of traumatized people, not too distant from us. So that trauma has probably impacted us a lot more than the couple of generations later than us.
Massively.
Exactly. So I always say we have that responsibility now for us to change it. And yes, people are going to be traumatized. Of course they will be. But when you think about the First and Second World War, that was a nation of traumatized people who are then bringing all that trauma home with them
and passing it on to us.
Exactly.
I'd never really thought of it as a generational thing, but you're absolutely right. It is. If you grow up in a household where your parents were traumatized by your grandparents who lived through the Second World War and the horrors of that, and then your parents were encouraged, or at least your father was encouraged not to speak, not to be vulnerable, stiff upper lip, man up, all of those things were passed directly onto our generation. I'm 42, you're a little bit younger than me. You're absolutely right. We need to change the conversation. We need to change for the better and pass it on to the younger generations. Or what are we doing?
Exactly.
We're just perpetuating this awful trauma.
Exactly. And I always say stigma has been created by people because it has been. We've created as a society, we've created stigma. We've believed that men should man up. We believe that men shouldn't show their emotions. So we've created a stigma that exists when men do show their emotions and things like that. Therefore, as a society, we're the ones who can get rid of it. We've created it so we can get rid of it. And this is why conversations like this are so important. And people just understanding that they have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. It's not to just a few. It's every single one of us as men, and not even just men, just as society in general. We have a responsibility for the newer generation to have a society where the suicide rate of men especially comes down. Yes, there will always be a percentage, unfortunately, but my goodness, how high it is it's fundamentally wrong, and it should not happen because we should be creating a society where there's support and there's no stigma
An
when we do
encouragement
that.
to be vulnerable.
Exactly, and it would change everything. But easier said than done, isn't it?
The more that we have these conversations and people like us interact and put it out there, can only be a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. We need to just have this idea of what we think masculinity is, and start reframing it, just changing it, and think, well, it needs to go on a rebrand. And I'm kind of doing this kind of thing now, which is called rebranding masculinity. I'm just looking into certain things which makes us question about masculinity a lot more, and be like, what does it actually mean to be a modern man? Because it's changed, but our perception's not changed of it. Because what men do now, it's completely different. It's completely different. men are staying at home looking after children instead of always being the one out working. Men are looking after themselves, and whether it's skincare or whatever, men are doing that so much more. And yes, there'll be so many people who will have the judgment towards it, but what it means to be a modern man actually is completely evolved, but our perceptions haven't caught up. So there's so much work to be done. Be like, well, we need to change. Even like, you look at the dating scene. Do men need to pay? Why should men be responsible for paying? Because women are just as capable. And yes, there's an element of chivalry, of course, but let it be an element of chivalry rather than expectation. And I think many men hold that and think, oh, I must. Well, you shouldn't. Only if you want to, and you every now and again, of course. But expectations need to change about what the modern man is capable of, because women and any gender out there, we're all capable of the same stuff. But unfortunately, the perceptions and there's different things in society that doesn't allow us to think like that. We all should be on that equal footing.
It's a conversation that's come up a few times during these shows, actually, of what it is to be a man and what does masculinity look like. Growing up, I think our perception of what it meant to be a masculine man was very, very different for me, at least, to what it is now. I've gone from a masculine man being someone who is very physically strong, very quite dominant, quite assertive, probably quite successful in business or, whatever. If I look at my late father as an example, had his own business, drove a nice car, all of these sort of trappings of success. Nowadays, I think of masculinity as kindness, patience, someone who's very tolerant, someone who brings people together. That, I think, for me at least, is what being a modern man is all about. Someone who's not afraid to be vulnerable. These are all things that I think we need to really press upon the younger generations. These are what are the important things. These are what make men masculine.
Exactly. It just needs to be on a complete rebrand.
Yeah.
Because we hold so much, as whether it's generational trauma or our generational beliefs, we hold so much of what we perceive men to be. And I will still have things I perceive a man to be through my own trauma and stuff like that that is completely wrong, and I'm working through them. But it's changed. We have to change with it, and the future generations are in a fortunate position because the conversation's starting, the conversation's ongoing about masculinity and what it means to be a man. Whereas when we were young, this is what a man was, and you're not questioning it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, because he'll beat you up.
Yeah, exactly.
I think going back to your work in the police force and sort of the framework, if you will, for the person that you are now. It's a lot like the entertainment industry in a way, actually. Maybe not the sort of hyper masculine side of it, but certainly long hours, quite stressful. Having to kind of put on a brave face a lot of the time. I think that's the thing for me. You mentioned it before, putting on a character, putting on a face, smiling all the time. That's, as a society, we need to kind of break that down as well and look at why men feel the need to perform all the time, to play these characters.
It's an interesting one because obviously in the police, as we said earlier, there's that perception that I have to be the person to protect other people. I have to be that person. So you think I can't show any vulnerability because I couldn't, when I give that death message to to the woman, I couldn't break down into tears, even though I wanted to, but I couldn't. I had to wear that mask. And yes, you have to be professional. Of course, there's a professionalization, but there's also too much, and you get too professionalized where you lose sense of that emotion. So it is. I can imagine it is very similar with this idea of playing a character, and I've never thought of it like that. I always thought just wearing the mask, but I probably did play a character in the police.
It's exhausting.
And that's the thing. It is exhausting. Your personal life is the one that suffers. For me, not the work. For many people, the work will suffer too, yes. But for me, that character is getting played, and my real life character was suffering all the time, which is a shame. And
did you ever have therapy?
I have a couple of different therapies. Um, I've had silent counseling, which is very, very good.
Silent counseling.
Yeah, it was
Ooh,
called silent counseling
tell
where
me about that.
so it was I wasn't at a time I wasn't in a place where I could speak about anything that happened in the police. I couldn't do it by breaking down into tears, and you'll probably even see when I share my story, it's still emotive, it's still hard. But I couldn't do that a couple of years ago. So this counseling was where I didn't need to speak about anything. It was all through the power of what do you call it? Whatever it's called, where they put not put you under, but it's
Oh,
all
hypnotherapy.
hypnotherapy. I don't know why I was saying psycho. Hypnotherapy, where I was all looking at that kind of stuff. And she looked at the different meridian points to my body, and she highlighted the things that I needed in my life then and there. And I did this thing where it was like saying yes or no, and if my mind was saying yes, it would lock, and if it wasn't, no. But I didn't know what the questions were because she would ask the questions telepathically, and
Wow.
it was if someone hasn't done it, look up silent counseling because it was the most transformational experience I've ever had in my life. And I came out of there feeling like a complete new man. And I'd always tell this story of just how impactful it was. So when I was getting the PTSD symptoms, I was having the flashbacks, the heart racing, and the sweats and all at night, all these awful things. I remember getting taken to the hospital one day because I had chest pains. And I remember they were put me onto like an ECG and they were saying to me, talking to me just about life. And I said about being in the police. And he said, I think you've got PTSD because every time you mention the police, your heart rate goes up. Every time you mention the word police, it went up. And as a result of that, going into hospital, I had to do further tests with my doctor. And the tests came back and they said, there's something wrong with your liver. We need to do something. We need to do more tests. We need to see what it is. And I wasn't a drinker. I've never been a big drinker in general. I was like, what's wrong with my liver? I don't know what's happened there. And before I got to further tests, I went to this silent counseling session and she looked at the different meridian points in my body. And she said, there's a negative built up energy in your liver. And she said, it represents anger and resentment.
Huh.
And at that time, I was so angry about myself. You asked me about did I regret stuff earlier on, and I regretted a lot back then. I was so angry that I wasted my 20s.
Mm.
I was so angry at the police and resentful of the police that they didn't give me the support that I really needed. They didn't identify it. They treated me just like another number, and I held so much anger. And we did this process of letting go. And I remember going back to the doctors to do further tests. And they got the test results back and they said, your liver's absolutely fine now. Whatever it was, it's completely gone. And it's that negative energy that I needed to clear in this silent counseling session where, she had no idea there was something wrong with my liver. And she found that we unblocked it, we cleared it. And then when I went to the physical stuff in terms of the doctors, they then noticed that it completely gone.
Wow.
That is the power of our mind.
Mm.
And it highlights that we all have traumas in our life. And if you don't heal from those traumas, they will find a way of attaching themselves
Mm.
within somewhere. Even though you may not see it, it will be within you if you don't process them. And in the police, I had so much I hadn't processed. And I think was a real awakening call for me where I realized if I don't start looking at all these different things that I haven't processed, what other thing will be next? Will I have stomach problems? Will I have, kidney problems?
Cancer.
Whatever. Exactly. Because negative energy that's built up in our body, it will always bring itself out in an illness one way or another. So that's why I always say to people, sort your traumas out. You may be physically fit right then, but you have no idea what's going on. And that example, something so weird where I was like, what's wrong with my liver? Highlights that we have no idea, and it's so important to to get it seen to, and sorry, to get your trauma seen to. And I just thought that was the most transformational therapy that I've had, and I've had ones where I've spoken and stuff like
Mm.
that. And I, I'm not saying that they're bad because the thing about trauma and healing from trauma is that everybody will have something different where they like this in terms of healing. Not everything's going to work. I can't say, by the way, everyone's going to love silent counseling or every. It was just what I needed at the time. When I've spoken to therapists, I haven't got much from it personally.
Mm.
Speaking to someone like you, I would get more from speaking with you and a conversation one to one than a therapist. Because I sometimes feel like the therapist, I don't know, just sometimes their questions, I just felt like wasn't as personal as you and I having a conversation
Mm.
to people, to deep males who just want to just chat it all out and being willing to be vulnerable. And there's a power in someone being vulnerable too, as we said anyway. And when I didn't get that from the therapist, the therapist's not going to tell me their traumas. Um, but when I didn't get that, I almost felt a little bit closed up too. So it didn't work for me. It'll work for many people, yes, of course. But it didn't work for me. But that silent counseling session was just,
Sounds amazing.
honestly, it was so
I've
so amazing.
never heard of it before.
Honestly, have a look.
I will
It's
do.
it's so
I'm
good.
always, I'm always, I'm always up for more therapy.
Yes.
But the more therapy, the better.
Yeah.
Therapize the shit out of me.
And that's the thing is there may be things that come up that you have no idea.
Mm.
And I think that's the most interesting thing that you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
right? I know which angle I need to go down now.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was amazing. So that really changed my life too, having that therapy. And that allowed me to then open up more to people. Even though I didn't open up in that therapy session, it allowed me
But
to.
you made that connection, and that's
100%.
what I think we often struggle with. People who haven't been to therapy, be it psychotherapy, be it silent therapy, hypnotherapy, whatever it is, it's about making those connections and going, oh, that's why I'm the way I am, or that's why I behave like that. That's what I got out of psychotherapy. I've done hypnotherapy as well.
Okay. Did you like it?
Yeah, I did. I'd actually, I think I'll go back.
Okay.
I did hypnotherapy for anxiety,
Okay.
and it was fascinating. He, it's an old therapist of mine I didn't realize he did hypnotherapy, and then one day he was like, do you want to try this?" And he read me this story. He had this folder, and he read this story, and I had to focus on his voice. And he's got lovely, calm, soothing. He's from the Wirral, lovely, calm, soothing Cheshire accent. And he said, he was saying, right, he took me down these steps into this cave, and there was this sort of story that he did. And I came out, and I promise you, for about, because I suffer from quite bad anxiety. I've had panic attacks in the past, and they're not actually, it's not actually trauma based specifically. You can't pinpoint it to one thing. You can't say it's because I was in the police and I witnessed a murder or whatever. It's a combination of things. I'd say for about 2 months after I had hypnotherapy, I wasn't anxious at all. So there's definitely some value in it. I do think that these more spiritual or whatever practices, they definitely have value, don't they?
Definitely. What do you think was the best therapy that you've done?
Psychotherapy for me.
Yeah.
Psychotherapy, talking. Maybe not. I can also totally appreciate you saying that you didn't feel like the questions that he was asking were particularly personal to you. I can understand that.
Yeah.
It can often feel quite clinical, can't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And a bit cold.
Yeah.
And you're like, I need that kind of relationship. I would argue that maybe you didn't find the right therapist.
I completely agree with that too, because I felt that lack of connection.
It's that.
So I felt like I'm a very analytical person anyway.
Mhm.
So the things that she was analyzing, I was like, I've already analyzed this. Like
Yeah.
I just felt like we didn't. There was just no connection there. But I think you're right that having that connection, especially with your therapist, I should have just said, wait a minute, I want to continue, but I need a different one.
Yeah, you need someone that you vibe with.
Yeah.
It's funny, I think it's quite a British thing as well to be kind of against therapy.
Yeah.
Whereas if we lived in America, everyone's got a therapist. It's like it's just a normal thing. Oh my God, who's your therapist?
Yeah.
You recommend a therapist? Whereas over here, we're like, oh, I can't possibly.
Yeah.
I can't possibly speak to another man about my innermost feelings. Are you mad? It's a funny thing, mate. It's a funny thing.
Yeah, the British don't like to open up.
No,
No.
we really don't. But as we've both hit upon, it's vitally important.
Yes, 100%.
Vitally important. Do you mind talking about PTSD?
Yes, let's go for it.
Because I think PTSD is something that luckily I haven't experienced. So you've suffered from PTSD.
Yep.
You've had treatment for PTSD.
Yep.
You've dealt with your PTSD.
Yep.
Talk to us about what PTSD is.
So for me, the PTSD that I suffer from will look very different any day. Like I don't know
Right.
actually know when PTSD will find itself in my body where I'm like, oh, geez, I didn't expect that. So that's obviously my PTSD speaking. Where obviously it comes from a lot of the traumas that I've experienced in the police, but it leads to life choices now for me that I have no choice but to do. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I need to do now is when I go into a cafe, a restaurant, or anything like that, I need to have my back against the wall so I can see everybody. Especially for police officers, where we're always hyper vigilant. That's one of the main symptoms of PTSD, where you feel like a distrust if someone's behind you. So I always need to be like, okay, I need to sit there
Wow.
because if I don't, I can feel that anxiety. I can feel my heart beating just a little bit faster, being like, oh, I'm not comfortable. People are behind me, and I'm just so hyper vigilant about my surroundings. That then leads on to big crowds, whether it's a concert or whatever.
Mm.
I get like, you know, any police officer will always be hyper vigilant in those kind of situations, whether you've done it for a few years, not or active or not, you'll always be hyper vigilant, but it's exhausting. And that PTSD, I think, makes it worse where I'm constantly hyper vigilant about what could go wrong.
Where the exits are, things like that.
Exactly. And it's exhausting because your eyes are like going everywhere. So that's difficult. The flashbacks is obviously a massive part of it where I remember waking up one morning. I say waking up. I thought I woke up and I looked outside and somebody was hanging from my window. They'd hung themselves. And it was obviously a flashback to me witnessing and cutting down somebody who had hung themselves. And I just remember waking up and my heart was just absolutely pounding. I had the sweats. It was horrific. And it will then impact my whole day where I then can't be like, okay, that was awful, right? Have a nice day. If I have a little episode like that, when I have no idea when it's going to come up. This is the awful thing about PTSD where, yes, I've looked into my PTSD and I've got therapy which is connected to it, but I have no idea when I'm going to get impacted by PTSD. I am now better at when I see a police van, I'm not getting that anger. So that's, highlighting something that's reminds me of a certain thing where my trauma holds. That's fine now. But as I said, certain things where I'm like, I can't control my dreams. And when I have the dreams of some of the things I saw or that last shift or one of the most simple dreams that I have, which people will be like, this is not even a nightmare. It's just me being a police officer again, just on shift, just in the canteen. And when I wake up, that's trauma for me because I'm like, it felt so real that I was back in a situation of trauma where I felt like I couldn't quit. I was that was my job.
Wow.
So I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm so thankful that it was a dream. But then my rest of the day, it's just I feel exhausted. It's almost like you've had 2 hours sleep.
Mm.
Now you're not like tired, but that way of drainedness where
Is it because you're like fight or flight
I
mode?
think so,
Constant.
100%.
Wow.
100%. So it's exhausting, and as I said, you've just no idea when your PTSD is going to impact you. And I always say, and when I spoke to therapists about it, they say, you do know you'll never just heal from PTSD, and then that's it. You don't have PTSD anymore. It's something where probably like anxiety and stuff, where yes, you can have coping mechanisms,
Mm.
but you can also just have one day where you're like, my anxiety's bad.
Yeah.
The coping mechanisms did not work or whatever. Just some days, I think it's just life, isn't it? Where we will have our low days because our something from our trauma has just impacted us differently that day. And no matter what coping mechanisms we do, we just can't help it. And you're anxious one day, and you're like, why do I feel anxious with this? I have anxiety with my stomach, will just feel that
Yeah.
anxiety when I'm
Yeah.
like, I have no idea why I'm
It
anxious.
absolutely in knots.
Yeah, 100%.
I struggle to eat.
Yeah.
My big one's food. If I'm having a day where I'm really really anxious, I can't eat.
Yeah.
I anything.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you'll have been taught many coping mechanisms
Mm.
for anxiety, but some days, no matter what, you just think,
Yeah.
I just can't do this.
Some days are just shit days.
Exactly. And with PTSD, some days are really, really, really crappy
Yeah.
where I really struggle. And I remember I did a conference last year and there was 10,000 people in this conference and I was speaking at it. And being in that environment with so many people, I remember I sat in the corner and I was almost shaking. I was like, oh my, I'm just so anxious. I just don't want to do anything here. I feel like shell of myself just being in this environment. And it was the first time really since the police where I was in a big environment like that.
Mm.
So I just now know, right, in those kind of situations, Rob, it's okay if you don't want to be in the middle of the hustle and bustle. Take yourself away, and those moments to pause and reflect and just take time for yourself is really important for me.
Mm.
And so it's about just having the coping mechanisms within the trauma rather than avoiding the PTSD. It's just about, right, how can I have the coping mechanisms to help with it when it does appear? But as I said, those dreams and night terrors,
Yeah.
they're brutal and they impact you for the whole day.
Do you find routine has any effect on it? Because I've found that having quite a specific evening and morning routine has impacted my life hugely when it comes to anxiety.
Okay.
Massively. If I know, if I spend my evenings um, planning, or not even my whole evening, if I spend an hour in the evening planning what I'm going to do the next day, so I know exactly where I'm going to be at each time, what I've got to, right, I need to speak to that person, I need to send that email, I need to write, I need to do that. If I've got like a big plan in front of me, then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, right, I know I've got a lot on today, but I've got it all planned out and I'm fine. I find that really helps. Is there
Good.
anything in that for you?
For me, structure is the thing that I don't like.
Oh, right. So
So
you just want
you
chaos.
saying that, I'm like, no, never. No, but I love spontaneity. That's one of my core
Yes,
values.
yes.
So I always need to make sure that within my day, there's room for spontaneity. So if I looked at my day and it's a full day calendar, I'm like, oh, like back to back meetings and things like that. I struggle with that.
Mm.
And I have to think, oh, where's the spontaneity coming from? So I think that's what's great about being self-employed, where I can have that element of flexibility.
Do you factor that into your day then? Do you factor in, right, there's a between 11 and 1,
Yeah.
you just write chaos.
Yes, 100%. 100%. I need it. I need that. Where I structure for me represents something very different to what you're saying. Where
Mm.
structure probably is the idea probably of the police, where I was going to do 2 earlies, 2 late shifts, 2 night shifts, 4 days off, 2 earlies, 2 late, all the time. And although there was chaos within the shift, that was my life. And you kind of
Mm.
knew when you were going to wake up after a night shift and things like that. And I hated it. So now I'm like, if I wanted to sleep in a little bit later, Spanish way of life, I'll do it, but I'll work late too. Then I can, one day I'll work until 1 a.m., one day I'll work till 10 p.m. or not even. It's very different for me where I have to have that element of spontaneity because if not, I really do get anxious about like, okay, these are the plans. So it's funny how we're all different,
Yeah.
and the structure would just be, yeah, that's my.
Was that part of the reason why you ended up moving to Valencia? Did that feed into that idea of like, I need to do something quite radical, quite different. I want to change. I want a new environment where I don't know everything. Because I assume, you go to Valencia, there's parts you don't know, you've not been to before, different sights, smells, people.
I think, yeah, 100%. I think I don't like to settle anywhere too long. And growing up in Belfast, I left Northern Ireland aged 19 and I
Mhm.
haven't been back. I did 10 years in Scotland and 10 years, so that was a university and then in the police. And then I went to Manchester and now Valencia. And I think after being in Scotland for 10 years, which I didn't want to be, I always had that itchy foot to be like, I want to do something different. And Manchester, great city, loved living there, I thought it was great. But after a couple of years, I was like, now I'm ready. So I think you're right. It's that thing of it's something I need to keep things fresh, especially because I know how rigid my life was,
Mm.
and I can't go back to the rigidness. So I have to have that element of flexibility and just put myself out of my comfort zone. And I know the police, yes, you are out of your comfort zone in many things, but it was a comfort zone I didn't control. And
Mm.
I think that increased my anxiety tenfold. See, going on shift, I was sometimes by myself. And like I say sometimes, a lot of the times I was by myself as a police officer. And I'd work the shift by myself. And you're like, you're waiting for your next call and you think, is someone's going to have a knife on you that you're having to go to, or is there going to be a murder or whatever it may be? Your anxiety was through the roof
Mm.
in that chaos. So in my chaos now, it's it's on my terms, so to speak, and that just makes all the difference. That's why I can never be an employee again. I just couldn't do it. I answer back too much too.
It's a great reason to
Yeah.
never be employed ever again.
Yeah.
I'm just a gobshite,
Yeah.
quite frankly. I can't. So it's a good life in Valencia. Then you're
Eh,
happy and
Yes, very happy, and I'm now looking for the next stage where I want to go next.
yeah.
So yes, Madrid's got my eye, so I want to go to
Oh,
Madrid.
Madrid's okay. Madrid's funny. Madrid's lovely,
Yeah, yeah.
but and this is a big but.
Okay.
It's so far away from any body of water.
That's the problem.
It's like a dust bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, have you been?
Yes, yeah, I've been a good few
It's
times.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's a
A
great
great
city.
city.
Great city.
Great football there and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. But my God, it's just so dry.
Yes, to live there is probably going to be very different to visiting.
I
And
think
I
so.
love to visit. I love going on holiday there and just for a few days. Absolutely brilliant. But living there, the way of life might be very different.
Yeah,
So
Barcelona.
let's say, I hear a lot about Barcelona, but people always say to me, you're either Barcelona or Madrid, not just in your football, but also in the way of life. And I love Madrid as a city. I think Barcelona's not going to be for me.
Mm.
That's just me being judgy because I haven't been. So I need to try it out. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Valencia is where it's at the minute, and then I just kind of take it one step at a time. I think I've learned that
I
where
can see that.
I don't want to look too far in the future. I don't like that structure of I know what I'll do in 2 years' time. I'll be doing this exact thing. I don't like that. I'm like there has to be an element of spontaneity where I'm like, oh, who knows?
Oh, I love that.
Who
I wish
knows?
I need a bit more of Rob. I need a bit more of Rob in me, I think. But the last couple of things I wanted to sort of ask you. What's the most important lesson that you've learnt on your journey since joining the police?
I think for me is about happiness. That's the most important thing. And the idea that what society may think is success, what society may dictate to you of what a happy life is, ignore it. Find out what makes you happy. That might be exactly what society says, yes. But if you follow what society's expectations are of success of, right, then you need to get a house and you need to get a really good job and then you settle down, you get a dog and then you get family and all these things. That structure of life as success and happiness, I don't believe is modern day happiness. I don't think it's ever was happiness, but people have went with it for so long. Understand what makes you happy in life. Don't care what people say. And I, for so long, took other people's beliefs of success, especially when my family were military or the police. The police was going to be a successful career if I joined that. Of course it was. And to many people, it would be, and probably would be for many. But it's about understanding you and your core values. If you always look at your core values and understand what they are, you make aligned decisions based on your core values, and then that brings a happier life. So it's the simple thing of understand your core values, and your happiness comes from them. And I took a long time to figure that out, but that's definitely a big lesson.
We're all a work in progress, Rob. We're all we're all just trying to be a little bit better
Yeah,
every day and a little
exactly.
bit happier. I'm with you, mate. I'm absolutely with you. Find the joy in each day. I think is the big one for me at the moment. Find the joy and really relish it and really enjoy it and
Taste it.
taste it. No, to
Yeah.
absolutely taste it. Yeah, rub it all over
Yeah.
yourself. That's what we need to do. Where can people find your content? Where can people go to listen to you and see you? Where is that?
Yeah, so if you follow Rob Hosking official on the Instagrams, the YouTubes, the LinkedIn's, the TikToks, but I don't use TikTok that much.
I've tried.
It's
I've
hard.
tried so hard.
Yeah,
I just
awful at it.
can't.
I'm awful
I
at it.
just can't.
Yeah.
I saw a thing that said this girl put this TikTok out and she was like, it said something like, if you do a TikTok every single day for a year, you'll never have to worry about money again because you will have completely monetized your TikTok, right? Which in principle sounds like a great idea. The reality of grown men doing TikToks every day,
Tough.
I don't have it in me.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
I'm so tired.
Yeah. So people don't follow me on TikTok
No.
because you're not going to get content.
Rob Hoskins official.
Rob Hosking official on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and you can go on my website, which is www.robhosking.co, and that's where you can book me for talks and all the rest of the stuff, all the rest of the wonderful stuff.
I think you're a really inspirational guy, mate. I think you've been on an incredible journey, and I think people will gain a lot from it, especially people who are listening to this. Who I have listeners who are in the forces. I have men who drive lorries for a living, you know, who are very much stuck in a sort of cycle of not necessarily negativity, but very, very, like you say, very regimented. These are your hours. This is what you're doing. This is where you've got to be. This is there. I think people will get an awful lot out of listening to you, mate.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.